Hello and welcome to the week ahead from the Financial Times in London. Here's what we're watching this week. After the historic vote made by the UK to end its membership of the European Union, the key question will be how quickly politicians both in the UK and Europe respond. On the other side of the Atlantic, sports manufacturer Nike will be putting out its fourth quarter results, and in another hemisphere, Australians head to polling booths in national elections. First, Europe and the Eurozone. It's been a nail-biting few months for markets, which have been trying to guess the outcome of the much-contested referendum in the UK over its EU membership. This week, voters decided to leave the European Union, sending markets across the globe into a spin. And the uncertainty is likely to dominate, at least for the short term, as our chief economics commentator Martin Wolf explains.
I expect the first consequence to be the consequence, as it were, of uncertainty. We know that businesses, financial businesses including investors, don't know what happens. They don't know who the next Prime Minister will be. They don't know what the next government's complexion will be. They certainly don't know what its policies towards the EU will be. And they, of course, also don't know what's going to happen to the economy immediately. So the natural thing to do is to retrench, to be cautious, to invest less, to take money out of sterling assets, to disinvest to the extent they can from the UK, given these huge uncertainties. And I think there will be similar effects, but not quite so big in the rest of the world, particularly in Europe, because they too will be uncertain, and Britain is a very important market.
It'll be too early for any of the data that's expected to publish next week, including figures for Eurozone inflation and economic sentiment, to give much guidance on the true impact of the vote. What investors will be watching most closely, however, will be the speed with which politicians act. In the UK, the most immediate question revolves around replacing Prime Minister David Cameron, who, after leading the failed campaign to remain in the EU, announced his resignation on Friday. And in Europe, how will leaders treat the UK in its negotiations to extract itself from a relationship that spanned over 40 years? Now to the world of sportswear. It was back in March when Nike, the athletic clothing maker, gave a cautious outlook with weaker quarterly sales growth than Wall Street had forecast. The company's share price, which surged by almost a third in 2015, has added about 2% in the past year. And this week it's expected to have achieved solid increases in sales and earnings when it releases fourth quarter results. Oregon-based Nike boasts more than 90% of the basketball shoe market, but our Chicago correspondent, Lindsay Whip, says the upstart challenger Under Armour has been making inroads.
Under Armour is scrapping hard with it. It sponsors star player Stephen Curry, whose success is driving a sharp increase in sales of Under Armour's burgeoning high-end basketball shoes business. And it also helps that this collection sells for lower than some of Nike's collections with LeBron James and Jordan. Next week, investors are going to be expecting some short-term volatility in the earnings ahead, given it's reducing inventories in the US and it's increasing spending on marketing for some of the big events this year, such as the Olympics. But what they'll also be looking out for is new chapters in its long-term growth story.
And finally, Australians will be heading to the polls this week to cast their ballots in the country's national elections. Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull is campaigning on a platform of jobs and growth, promising tax cuts for companies and economic stability. His main challenger, Labour leader Bill Shorten, is promising to invest more in public services and a crackdown on alleged rule-breaking by banks. Opinion polls show an extremely tight race between the centre-right Liberal-led coalition government and the Labour opposition, but betting odds suggest the Liberal coalition should prevail in key marginal seats. Jamie Smith, our Australian correspondent, has more.
This has been one of the longest and tightest election campaigns in living memory. It was called almost 2 months ago by the Liberal-led coalition government, which has struggled to pass legislation through the Australian Parliament. But as the campaign has progressed, government hopes of winning a definitive victory to provide a stable government have receded. The government should win enough key marginal seats in the House of Representatives to hold on to power, but it is unlikely to win a majority in the powerful upper house. This would complicate Mr Turnbull's attempts to pass reforms through Parliament and manage a disgruntled rump of MPs on his party's right wing.
And that's what the week ahead looks like from the Financial Times in London.